Tonight we are talking about episode 607, Sticks and Stones, written by Danielle Barrow. Danielle wrote Famous Last Words in season 5, which was 508, which was Catherine's favorite episode in that season. And it's directed by Jamie Payne, who did a number of episodes last season: Free Will, The Company We Keep, Journey Cake, and the finale. I'm Courtney Williams, and I am the producer of this blog, Outlander Behind the Scenes. I became a book fan in 2006 and a show fan in 2014 when the show came out. And I'm just a gigantic Outlander fan. I love both, and I appreciate both. And I love doing this discussion with my girlfriends and my sisters. I am drinking out of my fancy glass electrolytes.
Looks like ginger beer. So
okay. Yeah, it does look like ginger beer. It's kind of cloudy like that.
Yeah. Okay. So they're ginger beer color.
Hi, I'm Kathy Harmon. I am part of Blacklanders as well, Blacklander Convos. And I love doing this because I get to see my sisters every week. But I am a book reader and a show watcher. However, I read the book so long ago, I can't remember what's in them, to be honest. So I like them separately and I enjoy them both. And mainly I enjoy them most because of this. Knowing that I watch it with a different eye now than I did before. And then knowing that I'll have this discussion is always gives me two things to look forward to each week where Outlander is concerned. I'm drinking elderberry tea with a little honey in my favorite mug, but I don't know if you can see it because it probably says backwards.
We can.
But it was given to me by my TED coach. And it says, "She got mad hustle and a dope soul."
That's cool.
And it's true.
So it's my favorite mug.
That's true.
That's awesome.
My name is Carmen Schmidt, and I write the Outlander Anatomy blog, and I'm a book reader, actually a faithful book reader.
I'd say that's an understatement.
Yeah,
how many times have you read the books now? 14, 15?
14, and then I've read Bees 3 times. So I'm trying to catch up with Bees. But I am a book reader, and I do love the series, and I appreciate both of them, and I try to give space for each. Sometimes I'm successful about that, and sometimes I'm less successful about that. I love these talks we have. I look forward to them every week, and they raise my spirits without fail.
And we're missing Antoinette this week. She's fine, but she was not able to make it. And I'm sure she'll be back next week. Again, I was sucked in, and I stayed sucked in throughout this whole episode. I just thought it was another really strong episode.
My overall impression was that it was strong. It was really good. And it felt different from all the other episodes to me, but different in a good way, but still different. And I'll talk about it a little more later, but yeah, it was good.
My overall impression was that it was brilliant TV. I felt the same way. I was riveted from start to finish. My attention did not wane or drift. It was totally focused and trying to hear every single word that was said and every nuance, because there was a lot packed into this particular episode.
You're right, Carmen. I actually had to watch it the second time with subtitles because I felt like I was missing things. And so
yes, I did too. I did too.
Okay, so Catherine, why don't you kick us off with favorite scenes?
My favorite scene was when Claire and Lizzie were talking, and she was kind of getting to the bottom of why Lizzie, what happened. It was the first time we really got a good scene, like a whole scene around her, and it was so well done. And that was my favorite. And I just loved the story of it. I loved the humor. I loved, Claire's reaction to what she was saying. And her whole thing was like, what? It was so, she was so innocent, but yet she wasn't. And it was like just the cutest thing. But that was my favorite scene by far, by far.
I had a hard time deciding. I'll just go with the Jamie and Claire scene.
Which one?
In the surgery, where
in the surgery, that was my second too.
Comes clean with everything that's been happening. I bawled my eyes out the first time I watched that, and the second time, and I just thought it was such a beautiful scene. It was so well done by Katrina. You could really see her fragility, and once again Sam played Jamie, as that restrained listening, but you could see everything in his face and his eyes. You could see, like, just everything that passed through, from like, oh no, I worried, I thought it was this, to the softening, just the whole thing. He didn't say anything, it was just all with his eyes. And then I just thought that was such a well done, beautiful scene.
That was the one that I had for my favorite too. I just thought it was so wonderful to see them finally resolve what was keeping them apart. And he moved toward her several times, if you remember, and she would skirt around him and go away. And this time she really faced and came clean with him. And that is so great in a relationship when that happens, because it's freeing. It really, truly is. And, I know it sounds kind of schmaltzy to say it, but it really is, when partners are really truthful with each other and can confess and reveal their foibles and their fears and what they feel are their shortcomings instead of defense. That is a powerful relationship when that can happen. And I just loved it when she slipped her arm around him. And he, it reminded me of the very first episode this season when they were making love and she slipped her arms around his back in that intimate gesture that we hadn't really seen her do before. And then to have it repeated in this setting, and she released herself into his care. He's like a stalwart oak tree to me. He's just, I know he has his own fears and doubts and everything, but he just carries other people's. So, it's like the waves beating against a huge cliff and being driven back, by the strength of it. And I just thought that was a beautiful scene too. So I'll echo what you said, Courtney.
I agree also. One of the things that I felt, it felt to me, again, like it was the book coming to life. It's like the relationship you get in the book of his strength, her not always being the strong woman, her vulnerability, and his wisdom and his, his emotional, IQ is just high and always in the books. And so this really fit. And it also finally, it's like the whole time I was watching this, ever since last season, when she was abducted and she was raped, I was waiting for them to mention Wentworth at some point so they could show the connection, because he knew. What it reminded me of was back when she was telling him she was from the future, when he saved her from the witch trials. That's what that scene reminded me of.
Very good connection. I didn't make that, but I see that. Yeah. And that's like one of you said, Kathy, strong women unravel. And when they can do it in the arms and with the intellect and with the fullness of their strong man, it makes everyone stronger. And I'm so happy to see that. And I'll even put up with the ether storyline to get there in this. Yeah. I mean, I just loved that, because they have not been willing to go there with Claire since the first season. And it's just wonderful to see.
Well, my other favorite scene actually feeds into that one, when he was in bed and she said she was going to get tea, and he was clearly concerned. That is the Jamie we should have had when she was ill. That's the Jamie we should have had when she was, not able to sleep. Because that is who he is. He was like, something's not right. I don't know what it is. She tells me she's going to get tea, but I know something's going on. And so it was like this episode, more than any other, really, really, really got to the connection, because none of it was physical, really. It was all very intimate and very little physicality at all. But it was definitely very relational, and it was done extremely well and true to the books.
It was like we took a little hiatus from that Jamie last episode. Mm-hmm. He just didn't have the depth and the breadth that he's had in every other episode in this season. I was glad to see it back. Yes. So my next favorite was the garden scene. I just thought that one was fabulous with Claire, Jamie, Tom, and Alan. I thought those are 4 powerhouse actors, and I thought they all played that so well. And I loved the relational interactions between the different pairs: Jamie and Claire, Tom and Claire, Alan and Claire, Jamie and Alan. Just Jamie and Tom. It was so rich. I really loved that scene. And Malva was there.
And the baby.
Yeah. That was crazy how they had the baby laid on her body.
Yes.
I mean,
from the left side,
they went there, It was great.
I noticed that from the left side, you could see its little bum, and from the right side, you could see its head. And that was an interesting perspective that they showed. It was very touching to me to see that, instead of having been arranged, just straight on her body. It was laid in such a human way, I think. And I thought that was really well done.
And could you see an umbilical cord too?
I thought I could.
Yes. Me too.
I thought I could.
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And Claire probably would have laid the baby there.
I think so. I also like that scene. It was my second favorite. Courtney, you're reading my mind tonight. I just thought the interplay between Alan and Claire was just fabulous. He was basically doing an inquisition of her. Who did you see? Did you see anything? And you came out. Where were you? What were you doing? You came out with a knife. What did you come out with a knife in your hand for? I mean, it was just so accusatory of her. And you could see, she was standing there taking responsibility for what she did. And yet she knew very well what they were thinking about her. And that would be very difficult to face, I think. In fact, everything that she went through in this episode would be just enough to break most people. And so much social pressure and ostracism and judgment and all of that it would be very difficult to deal with.
I thought she was still in shock in that scene.
Yes,
too.
I think so.
Yeah.
And not to mention the emotional reaction of trying to save the baby and not being able to.
Yes.
And the guilt of that. But also, what I thought was very interesting, and if anyone was paying attention to seeing the arc in Tom Christie's behavior, how he was very subtly protective of her. He didn't allow Alan to attack. He pulled him back more than once, and in a situation where he could have been really harsh, he wasn't. And where he was when he first arrived, how harsh he was, and that harshness has softened over each episode. It's been very subtle.
Yep.
But his interactions with her have become softer.
Yeah, but yet he said,
"You're up to your elbows.
We find you up to your elbows in blood." I don't think we're implying anything, but there was a restraint there.
Yes. And then in the end, he's like, "What would you say?"
I don't believe this, and I don't want to believe it. Mm-hmm. But what? Explain.
Yeah. Or even when she said, we'll. He said, "What are you going to say about them?"
Yeah.
and he just accepted it. He didn't, counter, he didn't argue. And there is a certain deference I felt in that
was
scene.
Jamie. And I also feel like he's been stripped down. He came to the Ridge as but I mean, internally also, just he came to the Ridge with all these, this is who I am, and I'm the leader of these people. And then his family has basically, stripped him down.
Jamie completely emasculated him in that scene.
Yes, he did.
He did. Again,
I thought it was also interesting in that scene how he said to Claire, did she suffer? Please explain. And Claire went on to say that it would have, was it, how fast did it happen? I want to hear it from the healer. And Claire, of course, told him that it would have been fast. I'm not sure that's the same word that she used, but that's what she implied. And then he went to the place of, well, then she has to be buried out in the woods with her, with her child. She cannot be buried in consecrated ground. And I love that Jamie set forward at that moment and said, this is my land. Yeah. I'm the laird, and she will be buried in the cemetery with everyone else. And I was so delighted with that in him, because we book readers all know what a powerhouse he is as a man and a leader, and he really got to demonstrate it in that moment, and many others too, but that was right at the beginning. It was right at the beginning of the episode, and it kind of set the tone for multiple areas that are coming up.
She gave the answer as she thought she was giving to the father of a child who he loved. Because most people, when they ask that question, don't want their loved one to suffer. And that's how she answered him.
Right.
But that's not why he was asking.
So one of my topics for discussion, which I'll just bring up now because it makes sense, is, did Tom love Malva?
Yes. When he asked Claire about what would be said and she was speaking, he had tears in his eyes. He was just, he felt enough love for her that he appreciated that something good was going to be said.
I do think he had love for her, but I think it was a very conditional love. And I think that Tom came to the Ridge sure of the plan of life. And I don't think he's that sure anymore. I think being around Claire and Jamie is causing him to rethink things. And I can see several places in this episode, I swear, where he is thinking very deeply about what is going on around him. And I do see that change in him. I agree. I think he is much less stern, much less judgmental. It's not that he's totally put it away yet. He might, we'll see. But I do think that that his eyes are being opened to other possibilities, to another way of seeing life. And that is huge for him. If that happens, that is huge for this man. And that's what I think. Yes, he had love for her, but I think it was difficult. I think he probably felt remorse that it couldn't have been better than it was.
My feeling is that for some parents, they can't love their children until they see other people love their children.
Oh, that's interesting.
Outside of themselves. They can't see that the child is worthy of love until they see it through, as you said, Catherine, I think he saw it through Claire when she, he only has his perspective of Malva, and when she expressed what her perspective of Malva was, I think that sort of cracked him open a little bit. Yeah.
Based on what Carmen was saying in terms of, like he's deeply thinking and things are sort of opening his eyes. it seemed that way every time Alan showed any emotion about his sister being dead. It was like he had that look like, oh, wow, I had no idea you cared that much about her. I mean, he was almost like he was surprised by that level of emotion towards her.
Yeah, and I think he's thinking deeply about that.
Yeah.
I think he's wondering what
why
that's all about.
Yeah. I know that's what I was thinking. It was like, it was like he was almost like a spouse mourning the lot. But although siblings would do the same, but because she was his only ally where the father was concerned. So
yeah.
My other favorite scene were actually kind of the combination of the 2 times that Lizzie got married.
Lizzie got what?
Yeah, that Lizzie got married.
You're team Lizzie tonight.
I am team Lizzie because she did such a good job. I mean, she really did. And it was very convincing. It could have come off as really hokey or really comedic, or it could have come off as, insincere, and it didn't. It was really well done. And, the wide-eyed goofiness of the twins and, and her. And it's like they're just like these 3 innocents who somehow worlds got pushed together, and they're just like clueless, but so happily clueless, you can't help but celebrate for them. It's like they're not being really conniving, but they kind of are. And then she was sort of, on one hand defiant, but on the other hand, it's like, I'm not standing up to Jamie. There's no way, it's like, and so I like those scenes as well. And I thought that the editing was done really, really well, because you could not tell that it was one actor. You really did seem like there were 2 people that were identical playing the parts.
Yeah, well, I think Paul should get a lot of credit for that too. The actor.
Yeah, but even the way their shoulders hunch, if they wait from behind, whoever they have standing next to him, they hunch their shoulders in the exact same way.
I don't know. Do they have someone else? I think they just CGI
splice it.
Yeah. You think they splice it?
Yeah.
Well, that's one technique that is used. I don't know what they did here, but I know that they have that's done in some films.
Maybe they don't, but if they've found somebody who is his exact same size, if they don't,
Well, you generally, casting people, especially for this show, have been phenomenal. So I would not be surprised. I wouldn't put anything past them.
It's true. And they do have Sam and Kat have multiple stand-in people who, when they're getting the lighting right, and they have the costumes, they have everything, and you'll see them in on location as Jamie and Claire, and you're like, what? That's not quite right, because it's their stand-in, but they're completely in costume. So possibly. I'm going to say my next favorite was Mrs. Bug and the Frasers. I thought her name is Sarah Collier. I thought she did such a good job being Mrs. Bug. Just
nasty.
Yeah, being just like, I'm your housekeeper, however. And if they don't close that damn door when someone comes in to tell them something, I'm like, what are you doing? Mrs. Bug is right there.
Listening, always.
Always. Anyway, I thought that was a great scene, because that was with Jamie and Claire, Sam and Kat, and she really held her own and, was leading the conversation down this path of, and I thought of you, Catherine, because she basically said, you didn't see it. I knew she was trouble from the moment I saw her. And I thought that was Catherine's theme last episode. And then poor Claire's like, well, and then Jamie's like, enough, get out, you wench. I thought it was a good one.
I like the scene where Lizzie's washing the windows and Claire comes out and speaks with her and, asks her if she's been avoiding her, and she feels badly and says, well, I tried to tell you, I tried to get through your door and you didn't answer. And, it was on the day that Malva died, and Claire questions her and said, are you sure it's that day? Well, that came out to me totally out of left field. I was like, yay, that explains it, because I thought I assumed that it was Malva that made it to the porch, and then she went back out to the garden for some inexplicable reason. But no, that isn't what happened. She was on her way, but it was Lizzie who was at the door that Claire could hear, in her, as she was drifting in her ether fog.
Yeah, so she exonerated her.
Right.
From because I would have thought if I were Claire, oh my gosh, she came to me for help. She was trying to tell me someone was trying to murder her. And I was all blissed out on my ether.
Yep.
So it's my fault she died.
I thought it was really good. And, what I was disappointed about is that it only gave Claire relief for a very short time. And then Lionel's Fetch was right back being the awful, nasty demon that he is.
Wow.
Reminding her of every perceived flaw that she feels about herself, every mistake, she feels it like a wound. It is a wound. They are wounds to her, they're haunting her. And he is the perfect vehicle, in my opinion, for conveying that. He's just so malevolent.
What a terrible voice to have in your head. And
yep.
like, oh my gosh. Ugh. What worked for you, Catherine?
What worked for me was the pace, the editing, the acting, the music. The music after they were in the garden was a requiem by any description. It was just, I was listening to it and I kept thinking, gosh, this sounds like Handel. It was like you could just hear that it was just so beautifully done. And it was like Claire walking. It was like a funeral procession. That's what it sounded like. Like they were walking in a funeral procession, and that music. So the music really worked for me. As always, the set design. One of the things I liked actually this time, they had angles where they were going through all the doors, and you could see the colors of each room's walls lined up, and it was just beautiful. Because then I started noticing it wasn't just the colors, it was also the grain and the paneling and the stains, and it was just beautiful. That really worked for me. So the cinematography, what they had to shoot, and also and then the tenderness. There was tenderness across on so many different levels with so many different people. Even with Roger and Bree, their relationship is even, their connection finally is like really realistic. And even Ian, and when he, just everybody, even Tom Christie in his moment, there's a certain level of tenderness as well.
I noticed they really showed off that big house in this episode, and it's kind of crazy that we've only gotten rooms. They haven't gone through the house like that before, because it's gorgeous. I mean, I was like, John Gary Steele, you built a beautiful. I remember somebody saying like that they want to live in a place that he made in the first season, and Ron said, yeah, you'll have a beautiful plywood house. But I think this one's a real house. I mean, I would love to go to Fraser's Ridge and see that. What worked for me, I thought the opening with Malva's flashback was fantastic. They have jumped us into these episodes, like with the river, with the baby going down the river, and Malva and her flashback, because she told Claire that her father made her confess it in church. And again, so well done by Jess, and such a great way to kick off that episode. Kat's portrayal of Claire's trauma really worked for me. She really was convincing. The camera work and the creativity and the subtlety in this episode, like that same scene that you were just talking about, Catherine, when they go from the garden to the house. It was like a slow motion. There was the music. There was Malva's white, pale hand kind of trailing as Jamie carried them. There's Claire slowly looking over at the people looking at her while she's covered in blood. It was just I loved that. I thought that was really fantastic. Yeah, and I don't know how much is like the notes from the writers, like in the script, or how much is the director, but there was a lot of that. There was Claire threading the needle with shaking hands, and then her walking toward the table with the sun. You know, as she steps, the sun comes in her face and then out and in her face. The camera's askew, so creepy when Malva's hand like grows out of her sleeve in her vision. Like, what? That was like a horror movie for me. And then the ticking carafe stopper. I mean, just, and then the ticking clock, all of that. Let's see, Roger as a minister. I am digging Roger this season, and I believe him as a minister. And as I was watching, I was thinking, I want to interview Richard Rankin and see if playing Roger as a minister has impacted him in any way, has changed, because he has to read these lines and he has to read them with feeling and he has to sort of adopt that. I wonder if it's having any kind of impact on him. Both the bugs really worked for me. We start to see their duplicity in this episode, and I thought it was really well done. The ensemble was great, and then the supporting actors, Hiram Crombie, the bugs, Obadiah Henderson, everyone was so strong. I could go on and on, but the montage with the voiceover from preparing for Malva's funeral was brilliant, with Alan building the coffins and Lizzie getting the dress from Tom and then trying to offer him food, and he's already closed the door. The creative book adaptations, the relationships, and the ending. I thought the ending was fabulous too.
Well, I think you read my notes.
Again, I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's okay. That's what happens when you're last. It's just the way it works. I agree. I think everybody was spot on in their acting, and they played their parts extremely well. They came across with force and with an understanding of who they are representing in their portrayal of the character that they are sharing with us. And I thought, I just couldn't see I couldn't see any weakness anywhere in terms of the acting. And that's one of the things that I tend to look for. But I thought it was just really wonderful. I saw the ground glass stopper, like a time ticking kind of idea also. And then when she was lying in bed, and she has her face covered because Lionel's sitting over there like a gnome, next to the fireplace, and you can hear the clock ticking, as you said, Courtney. Those are themes, that are running through this. When to me it was a metaphor of how awful that time must be, and how you would want that time to pass by quickly, and it doesn't pass by quickly. It's the same as every other second. It's going to be over when it's over. And I just think that was really well done, especially the ground glass stopper. I was like, whoa, that is just super artistic and thoughtful. And who would have thought of doing that? Somebody thought of doing it, but it was just extremely well done. I think Claire's dissolving into her grief and her coming close to a mental breakdown. She says that, she doesn't know who she is anymore, and that she hears voices, and that, Lionel speaks to her, that she sees people. When she tells Jamie about that, I thought that was just really, really powerful. But the part that got me was the compartmentalization part, where she says she's always put things in little compartments. Frank, him, grief, patience, and everybody, had their own little compartment, and that's how she dealt with things. That's a defense mechanism. But if she comes through this, she will turn that compartmentalization into a coping mechanism. And that is a much stronger way of dealing with the trauma of life than a defense mechanism. So I've got my fingers crossed for her, and I think she's going to do it. But I just thought that was all extraordinarily well done. I agree about Merdina and Arch finally showing their true colors. I mean, they're not very nice people, and they're not loyal to Jamie and Claire. And I have to say that the Fisher folk, for coming on to someone else's land and being given a way of making a living, when they didn't have much choice, they didn't have much other place to go or opportunity, and he opens his door to them, and lets them come in. They are really an ungrateful bunch. I really think that they're pretty sour and condemning people. And Obadiah was bad, but Hiram Crombie, oh my gosh, what he said to Jamie. I mean, good for Jamie that he said, choose your next words carefully if you value your life. I mean, his statement that, you went around and you debauched a flower-faced Scottish girl, and you stayed with your sharp-tongued wife who has even sharper knives. I mean, that's about as cutting as you can get without actually using a knife yourself. I mean, it was just insulting and deeply offensive. And and very convincing, by the way, in his wee part. I like the end story of the Sin Eater. That tied that back in, to the
finger bones.
Thank you, finger bones. Thank you. Yeah. I thought her ether dream, where she hears people speaking to her. Black Jack Randall. Colum was in there. I heard Father Bain, I think. I heard Dougal. I heard Lionel speak to her.
Galus.
Galus. I mean, that was just a marvelous array of people in her life who disapproved of her in some way or was suspicious of her, all bringing up these past, the current trauma, bringing up these past experiences in her life where she felt that she was being condemned and judged. And she was in most of those instances. So the ladybug, so jollily, and, it's like, oh, look, a ladybug, and all of a sudden it sees the drop of blood and flies off. That was brilliant, I gotta say.
Yes, I agree. I actually looked up, because I was curious about that, what the meaning of a ladybug is. In the Bible, it says the ladybug is a bringer of gifts. It brings oil to Jesus, wine to Mary, and bread to God the Father. It is in particular the bringer of good things to humans, clothes, pots, and jewels. Also a bringer of transformation. So I thought that was interesting. It was exactly the feeling like, oh, a happy ladybug. And then there's blood. And it's like, I'm out. So the good stuff gone, Just really this season, so strong. And Hiram Crombie, I was like, why didn't Jamie kick his ass? And what I decided is because Claire's so traumatized and she's right there that he just was like, I'm not gonna go there.
Plus his words. I mean, if he had tried to hit him or tried to attack Claire physically, I could see him doing something. But I think he's just too developed as a man to hit somebody just because they're saying something.
Because they're ignorant.
Yeah. But he made sure he got his point across.
Yeah.
Choose your next words, and he looked scared enough to believe that he was in danger. So I think that was more effective than a punch.
He had a lot of balls saying that. I'm not as developed of a man as Jamie, I guess. All right, let's go to least favorite scenes. Catherine.
my least favorite actually it was odd because there were certain things within scenes that were my least favorite. No one scene was my least favorite. So the only things that seemed inconsistent, like when Ian was talking about finding the sin eater, and he's like, his finger bones are missing. Most people would just say his fingers were missing, not his finger bones.
That's true.
And so that. The other was that, on one hand, I was looking, when they had the top going back and forth, the first time I heard it, I was thinking it was like a pendulum. It swings from one extreme to the other, and then it slowly comes to the center, and it balances in the center. And so I was thinking, oh, it's just showing her swinging. She's swinging back and forth to extremes. But what happened though in the editing is that it came to a stop, and then it started again. And I noticed.
Hit it. She hit it.
Well, that's what I thought. So
Yeah.
then I was thinking, well, maybe what it is that because she's drinking several glasses, it was a way of saying this is happening over and over again.
I think she intentionally hit it to get it going again from
I
the
didn't
standpoint
see it
of the production. Yeah, she like nicked it with her hand or the glass or something. So
well, that when she was putting
the
whiskey decanter back down.
It. I mean, that was absolutely it.
Yeah.
The things that I didn't like were just, I didn't like certain things that were happening, not because it was a problem with the production. It was just that I just didn't like the way Claire was being treated, but that's part of the story. So there's nothing to dislike, really.
My least favorite scenes were the Lizzie and Claire scene.
Really?
Yeah. I guess, I watched it twice. I did think that Caitlin did a good job. I wasn't that interested. I don't know.
Is it freaky deaky Lizzie?
Yeah, I don't know. And then also the Bree and Roger scene when he tells her he wants to be a minister. I thought it was really awkward. It may be directly from the book. Carmen, you would know that. It felt like he was revealing himself to her, and she was kind of like, well, yeah, we got time. I don't know. It's very casual. And I
for
do
such
think,
a monumental event and decision.
Yeah, exactly. And he's looking so clearly looking for her approval.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember that Bree in the book was a little bit like that.
It's been a while since I read it. I think she was more, questioned him more rather than just sort of, oh, okay, if that's what you want to do.
Yeah.
I remember her saying about her being Catholic, that might be a problem for his parishioners.
Didn't have the heaviness you would have expected it to have, like the way the connection, the emotional connection of like a father-son moment between Jamie and Roger when he told Jamie.
Yes.
And that was very much a father son moment.
Yeah.
But that was not that was more of a sibling moment between Roger and Bree. It wasn't a spouse moment. It didn't feel like a spouse conversation. It almost like he was talking to like it was a co-worker responding to saying,
or a little sister. He was like, well, I'm interested, but
and then it just seemed like it was heavy, and then there was no more discussion until they were leaving, and it's like, your daughter's about to leave, it's like there was more emotional reaction to Fergus and Marcelly leaving. Maybe it's because they're permanent.
They're not moving.
I think that's why.
I didn't have a least favorite. I had some that, not in the usual sense that we discussed this.
Yeah.
Just parts that didn't work for me. And I thought the odd conversation about vegetarianism and sandwiches as Jamie and Roger were walking toward the stable was a little bit odd. I couldn't figure out what the point of that was, and why did Arch remind him that they were going to go kill a sow now? And I think what he was saying was, you city boy, you go on back. We're the ones that take care of and make everything run. You don't know what you're doing, and I can say anything I want to your son. but I thought the sandwiches and the vegetarianism was kind of pointless.
I thought it was cute.
Was put in there. You did?
I thought it was just like one of those cute conversations that, those, mundane conversations you have with family members as you're walking, and you're just like saying stuff, and it's like you're like these non sequiturs. Like, where'd that come from? Well, and then it goes into something serious all of a sudden.
I can see that.
I thought the Archbug and Roger scene, what I got from that was there's this resentment that's building. The bugs are like, who are these faithful servants? And then, there's a whole backstory, but I thought the point of his, Roger's trying to say, hey, be more aware of what you're saying in front of my kid, which to an 18th century guy is like, what?
Wait, yeah, it's not gonna.
He's like the little prince.
I'm not even
won't
sure
get
that
any
was,
traction.
I'm not even sure that was around in, maybe the 80s a little bit. But so I thought he brought up the butchering, like, yeah, and we have to go butcher a pig before we take the whiskey, and I would ask you to help, but you're too much of a lily boy.
Yeah, that's how I took it.
And you're trying to raise a lily boy too.
And you're raising a lily boy. Yeah, exactly. I think Roger was then making a transition about the sandwiches based on what Arch said, because Jamie said, that's enough, Arch.
Yes.
I think he brought up the sandwiches, like, did you lose your appetite? Somehow are you not liking your sandwich either because Arch, and then they went into vegetarianism, and that's what I saw was the connection. What didn't work for you, Catherine?
The only other thing that I thought was getting a little overused and a little tiresome are the little groups of fisher folk always stopping in. Another scene. It's like, okay, we get it. They don't like Claire.
Yeah,
we get it. They're small-minded and they hang around in groups like, teenage cliques. Fine, we get it. But it's like every other scene we kept seeing them, these little groups of people.
Yeah, it's like Ferguson, this flask. We got it.
Yeah, exactly.
I was a little confused by the whole Kezzy and Joe missing from the search and Lizzie covering up for them, and Bree's like, oh, what have you been doing? And picking stuff out of her hair. Like, that was a little loose to me. So are we supposed to think that Kezzy and Joe and Lizzie were out like fooling around the whole time Ian was searching? Like the entire time? I mean, I guess with 3 people it takes longer, but
maybe not the whole time, but I mean, they were all together laying around.
And what is she protecting them so much for? You know what I mean? Like, no one's gonna know that's happening. I didn't get that.
To follow up on that, I also didn't understand why Ian was instantly almost suspicious that she was hiding something. She didn't really say or do anything that would cause him to think she was hiding. I don't think. She just said, they'll be back. They're not here right now, but they should be back soon. And he's like, well, what are you hiding? What's going on? Tell me if you know anything. And it just seemed like it was like there wasn't enough hint there for him to go there, but that's a pretty minor one.
To suggest that he was in a heightened state of suspicion.
That's true.
With
that's a good point.
Mm-hmm. Good point. Okay, and I also want to say now, is this the same Lizzie that was admonishing Claire for cursing? And this week she's having an oiled up threesome. And when Claire says that Hiram Crombie would stone you, she's like, why? I mean, so last week she was like an 18th century person, and I felt that part was a little like, really? I mean,
you don't know.
Well, I think you can rationalize anything when you're emotionally involved in the situation. And I think also her admonishing was more, again, a reflection of that particular situation. They were already in a heightened emotional situation. So, she just latched onto something.
Right. And I could see from her innocence being like, we're not hurting anyone.
Mm-hmm.
Why is this a problem? And that was in the book.
Mm-hmm.
But the contrast I don't know. They've kind of portrayed her as an airhead anyway. So
yes, they have.
Maybe that's why she doesn't really get it.
She is an airhead, and the Beardsleys is just like these wide-eyed, like they don't seem too bright either.
I mean,
it's a good combination.
Yeah,
it's so funny that
like, huh? What? I don't know.
When she's telling the story, and she's like, and I told them to rub it all over me, and he said he didn't want to get better take shirt. So I said, his shirt, perhaps he should really take it off. And then the next thing I knew,
I thought that was funny that he would be concerned about his shirt because they're, they always wear the same outfit. It can't be a good shirt.
I think maybe he was thinking something else. I don't know.
I do too.
Oh yeah, and that's what I was thinking. Could they have not gone and met up with Ian after they finished frolicking with Lizzie? Like
Jamie told Ian to take them, but they didn't know.
I got the impression they were out there in the stall.
Oh yeah, that must have been
because they come out of there when Jamie and them go up there and he marries them, that they had been hiding away in the stall.
Well, maybe that's where they were frolicking, since she had hay or something in her hair. Was malaria introduced before this season? I remember kind of that they had left that out of the story. Did they?
No, in season 4, it's briefly mentioned that she is, that she has recurring fevers, or I can't remember if they used the word malaria, but I think so. I don't remember which episode.
Okay. And I need to correct something I said in 606, which was that Bree and Roger had already left when Claire got sick. That was incorrect, because how could Roger be there the next morning? What I was thinking is that they had left now before the Browns came to confront them. I was trying to come up with, did they give some of Jamie's airtime to Bree? In my mind, probably. I was thinking she wasn't there. Yeah, but I think that happened anyway, but they were there. That was incorrect on my part.
When Claire picks up the coffin, the infant's coffin, and Alex, basically drops Malva's coffin and goes back and snatches the coffin. Where's Jamie? He's back there at where they were sitting, and he's kind of got his head down and his hands folded in front of him. He doesn't do anything. That was out of character. He would have been up there like a shot if he thought that Alan was, threatening Claire. Now, that was very impulsive of Claire, and certainly not a very good idea, but she's known for that, putting herself at risk like that.
How did Ian get to him faster than Jamie would have? Since he was beyond Jamie at that point in the room.
Yeah, I was thinking.
So you're right. I mean, what I'm saying is what you're saying makes sense, because Ian was beyond Jamie, and so how did he get to Claire, to come between Claire and Alan?
Well, they put the coffin down though. After he dropped his end, they put it down, and I assume he walked back, but we just didn't see it. That's one of the things that I noticed that I thought was out of character for Jamie. Another thing is that I thought it was odd that Bree would ask Roger if he thought Malva's baby was in heaven. As a Catholic at that time, she would have thought that the baby would be in limbo. Is that correct,
Purgatory.
Courtney?
Yes, it is.
No, limbo.
Limbo is where
that's right. Limbo is different than purgatory.
Yes. Yeah. And apparently now that after Pope Benedict, that's been abandoned to a large degree. Yeah. But at her time, she wouldn't, I think that was out of character with what she would believe for her to ask that. I mean, it's possible that she was interested in his idea, but I would think it would be more likely that she would say, this is what we believe as Catholics, and then she would state that to him. Why was there a fire in the bedroom fireplace and Jamie has his shirt off so that he's bare chested? Is that for us? Is that why they did that?
Do you know?
Whereas you think he's a lot warmer than she is. And
Antoinette brought that up, and I was thinking, we know that Jamie is like a hot, like he runs really hot. So maybe that's why he always has his shirt off. Because maybe Claire's cold, and that's why they have the fire, and he's hot.
Yeah, they need a number bed, right? And sleep number bed. The last thing is that I thought Claire picked up that coffin really easily. That's going to be pretty heavy. With yes, the infant is small inside, but that's quite a bit of wood, and is to pick it up so readily like that and turn to dash out the door was just, I thought.
Although I mean she picked it up. I mean, it's not like she didn't pick it up in real life, so maybe it wasn't as heavy or she's strong. I mean, the thing is, it wasn't like they made the coffin lighter than it would have been. So
no, I don't.
Yeah, so I'm thinking that probably it's just she could pick it up. She was able
because the baby didn't weigh that much, right?
Maybe,
and that poor baby, and Alan snatched it away, man.
I was thinking of what was going on inside,
clunking all around it.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I also thought that Roger had an awful lot of paper. Don't you remember that Jamie used to write in the margins because paper was, up the side of any page, nothing was wasted because paper was so precious. And here are all these pieces of paper, and it looked like he was only writing on one side. And so that seemed a little inconsistent. I don't think it's a big deal, but I just noticed it.
Well, it's consistent with season 5 when they were making paper airplanes.
True.
And you brought this up. You said something I wanted to comment on. I was impressed by Ian, how just, he was like Rollo, protecting Claire. And Jamie even tries to pull him back. Like, don't do that. And so the only thing that I could think is because Alan had said not him when he was going to be the pallbearer, that maybe Jamie was trying to okay, this guy is so grief-stricken, I'm going to just hang back.
He was being respectful of that.
Yeah, I know he's not going to hurt her. I think he's just, really grief-stricken, and I don't want Ian to punch him. That was the only thing I could think. And he also saw that Ian was on it. Because Ian was basically like, if you touch my aunt, I'll kill you,
I can see that. I just don't think that was what I would expect him to do, but I can see that as an explanation for why.
And I thought maybe Ian did that because Jamie's already dealing with enough. And he if he does that here, it will be even.
Well, and the other thing is
worse.
that Ian is more of a peer, I suppose, of Alex, whereas Jamie's the Laird of the Ridge, and in essence, and for him to come down on Alex, it would be viewed badly by the people. But if Ian gets after him, then it's more like a one-on-one, age-wise and status-wise, perhaps.
Alan or Alex?
It's Alan. The actor is Alex.
Okay, because I'm so bad with names. I'm like, okay, maybe not.
Yeah, no, I started with Alan and I dropped to Alex somewhere along the course of tonight's discussion.
It's all good. Things I noticed, Catherine.
The walls even more so. I mean, given how much I look at them, you think that I would lose interest at some point, but it just seems like every single episode there's something new to look at. Like there's this, in like what looks sort of like a mustard color on the outside, when they show it through the hallway and through the other, it looks like a chartreuse, which is my favorite color. And so I was like, wow. The other thing I noticed was the relationship, the hierarchy of relationships. It was very much very obvious in this episode that Jamie was at the top of the totem pole and everybody else was below him, at least. And anyone who tried to pretend like they weren't, they got pushed down back where they belonged. And so it almost like there was like this royal family of Bree, Roger, Claire, and Jamie and everyone else who are their subjects. And it seemed like I noticed that dynamic more in this episode than in others. I noticed also the children are missing. They were so great. But it's like, where did they go? They just disappeared, except for Jimmy. Maybe put him in a box somewhere, I guess. I don't know.
Marsley and Fergus took away all
of them.
That's true. Actually.
Yeah, that's true.
When Jamie is standing at the railing and has his hands over the railing before he goes in to talk with Lizzie, I saw his scars finally on the back of his left hand. And I was pleased to see that because I've been watching for him to see if they remembered, and they did. I thought I'm intrigued by the glass panels in her surgery that are hanging in the window. And then she has a rack to the left of them where there are more of these glass panels sitting there. Mm-hmm. And I think maybe they might be dried herbs, examples of dried herbs that she's matching them to, what's picked and so forth. I wasn't sure, but I'm intrigued by those. I think they're an interesting feature of her surgery, and I would like to learn more. I also noticed that Richard Brown's malicious jaw was working again at the end. I don't know how he does it, but he does. And then I thought it was fun to see Jamie. He was either preparing the heating pan for the bed, or he was putting it away. I think he was putting it on the rack so it could be kept warm. They would put coals on the inside of it and then a lid over it and slip it in the bed to warm it. And so maybe he was just keeping it warm by placing it next to the fire like that. I wasn't sure, but that was a pretty cool feature because it was the right time for that. One other thing that I noticed was that the church has a stove, a wood burning stove in back of where Roger stands.
Wow.
That stove is so small. There were several things. It is so tiny that the only thing it would warm would be Roger's backside, because it's not going to warm that whole room, which with the vaulted ceiling with this one little wood stove. And then the Franklin stove, which was, it's in the right time for Benjamin Franklin's wood burning stove. It was open in the front. It was a 3-sided structure and that slipped into a fireplace. So this was a freestanding one. Now, apparently, the first one was patented in 1557 in Strasbourg, but it was so expensive that only the really wealthy could afford to have one of these stoves. And it wasn't until the Industrial Revolution where iron could be cast in mass that they became affordable to most people.
And this was the Benjamin Franklin stove?
No, that's any of the wood burning stoves.
Oh, okay.
So they became more popular after the turn of the century. So I thought that was probably a little bit early to have a stove like that, and I'm not sure how functional that it was. So those are things that I noticed.
Always a pleasure. In the book, does Lizzie say that she's had them both at once? I thought Claire,
not in that way.
Yeah, I feel like Claire asks her and she says no at that point. No, not together in the beginning. I don't think they had a menage a trois in the book so early, maybe later on, but that's my memory.
Well, I think they were both participating in rubbing the ointment on her.
That's true.
So she might not have been telling the truth, but I'm pretty sure that she probably had relations with both of them at the same time. I mean, not at the same time, but that's would be difficult.
Lizzie, that's right.
Yeah, she's a talented woman.
The Mackenzies, I noticed, are not light packers. Did you see everything they were taking on that trip? My goodness, Jemmy's going to get smashed in between all those boxes.
Yeah.
I noticed that Tom's ponytail looked longer in this episode. Did you guys see that? I could be wrong, but
I noticed the wigs in general, but not necessarily.
No, I didn't notice that it was longer. I noticed Claire's hair is longer.
Mm-hmm. And that wig, oh gosh, yeah, didn't work for me. That's one thing that didn't work was Claire's wig.
Okay, why was Malva's funeral so poorly attended? Was that because she was a whore or because of COVID?
Probably because she probably wasn't well liked either.
Yeah.
And sure there were a lot there when she confessed.
Exactly.
That's because they were in church. That was church.
That's true. That's true.
That's true.
That was church at that day. So they were there for church, and she stood up and said something. But
and where was our favorite Karen, Mrs. McGregor? Let's see. I noticed that in the creepy dreams, sometimes Lionel moved his mouth and sometimes he didn't.
Yeah.
You guys notice that?
Yeah. Yes. I think that was done on purpose.
Yeah.
Because they were trying to let you know that, she was having
it was in her head.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
I noticed the wood paneling in the big house. Gorgeous. And I wanted to give you a reader comment. We went too long last time, but Laura R said, your team is doing a great job. As an architect, I love that the set design has been true to North Carolina housing style. The big house is built in the dog trot style, one that uses the open air hallway between two parts to the same roofed house. I keep noticing it and am pleased by this detail accuracy.
Yeah, I've never heard of that term before.
Yeah.
The dog.
Well, I knew they had kitchens that were separate because to prevent house fires.
Mm-hmm.
Who was the drumming person in her dream? Did you see that?
Yeah.
Is that what they were doing?
It looked like it, like some kind of.
Yeah, some kind of whap, whap, whap. I thought, couldn't tell.
Is that from, her World War II memories, or is that from like episode 512, the finale? Was that part of that flashback? I couldn't tell what that was.
Wasn't sure.
I noticed that Alan said, they're dead because of you bastards. You took my sister from me, and yet you still get to live your perfect, happy little lives as if nothing's happened. Yeah. I'm not sure that's an 18th century line.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That sounds more a little present there.
Yeah.
I want to know what happened to Mr. Weems.
He stayed in Scotland, didn't he? They said goodbye at the dock.
They did, but he's in the book, so I wonder when he's going to come back, or if he's going to come back. Well, the Browns rode up on the Fraser's horses, including the cute little
those horses are the horror of the horse of it.
they're around.
No loyalty whatsoever. They just have no loyalty.
Including the cute little bay that Lizzie was apologizing to. But never mind that. I mean, I actually try not to look at that. That's like the medical stuff for me. I'm like, okay, don't notice the horses.
Don't notice the horses.
Yeah.
Well, I would say for the medical anatomical one, it looked like the incision on her neck shifted, but because when it first was shown, it looked like it went all the way across her throat. This time it was very clearly done by a right-handed person. It was only it was mostly from like just left of midline, and then it went through to the right.
Oh, okay.
So it was obvious someone came up behind her and did this with a right-handed person. So I noticed that. The other thing I did notice was the sort of the routine that physicians stick to. So like she was washing her hands when she was going to be touching. I could see her washing her hands after, but she washed her hands before as if she was going into a surgery. And she was treating it because it was just a routine thing. However, though, when she was holding the needle holder, she was actually not holding it correctly. Used the first and fourth finger, and she was using the first and third. And so, which, that's something minor. But the other is that her stitching was not the greatest. She went a little bit far when she was, usually I would think that wouldn't have been the type of closure she would have used in that situation. She would have done it in a way so it's less, like Frankenstein, and more like more cosmetic. Mm-hmm. So bringing the edges together rather than just kind of making these, a disconnected. It would have been. I would think she would have used more of a running stitch than individual stitches.
She was tying each stitch off.
Yeah, and I
would going to the next
one.
And no, she would have. I think she would have done a running stitch too. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
I mean, I know, but it wasn't an open casket situation, mm-hmm. So she wasn't trying to hide the repair. Yeah. Would have been faster.
Why did she have to clean her up if she's just going to be in a box?
I think probably because, like Jamie said, she's already suffered enough indignities. And in those days, well beyond those days, it was the family members and loved ones that washed the body of a person who had passed away, if they were loved and cared for. And they would wash them before, and dress them for burial. So right. That's what I saw her doing, evolutions of the body, mm-hmm. and trying to put her together as best she could with the skills that she had. That's what I think.
Yeah, I mean, I got the impression that she was putting the dress on and everything, but there would have been some viewing probably that we didn't see.
I would.
Perhaps. And she probably put a scarf or kerch around mm-hmm. her neck, to help
hide.
Cover that. Yeah, to help to hide it. But no, I agree, Kathy. I think there's no point in doing a stitch like that. So we already mentioned about the baby mm-hmm. Being on, that it had been laid there. But then where was it when Claire is working on Malva? There's no baby anywhere. Mm-hmm. You can see the rise of her belly, but I don't think that's the baby down there. I think
that's just postpartum.
Yes, stomach. It's just the stomach. So I thought that was a little bit, I would like to have known, what she did with the baby. It was not at all clear. I noticed the kettle near Malva's body and that the blood had been cleaned off before she goes to stitch her up, and I figured that kettle was full of water to wash. I also thought that was an awfully big needle that she was using mm-hmm. to stitch. That was something like you might use on a horse, but or a carpet. I mean, she's going to fix her up, right? It was like a huge, it was a huge needle. Her demise psychologically. I don't have training in psychiatry, so I want to be real careful what I say, but I thought that was very well acted, convincingly acted, and watching her fall apart basically and grasping at any straws that she could do to try to right herself. She knows her ship is back in that hurricane, and it's going down if she doesn't do something, and she is struggling to find equilibrium in the midst of everywhere she turns. And then here comes Lizzie with her problem, and I mean, it's just I think it would just be pretty overwhelming. I'm extremely sensitive if my neighbors are unhappy with me, and I can't imagine everybody in your community thinking that you're a murderess, and that you are, and your husband has been fornicating with a young girl, and won't take responsibility for it. That's a lot. That's a lot. And so I thought that it's been portrayed extremely well by Katrina. So that would be part of the medical.
The psychosis that she was experiencing, one is very common with PTSD, very common with depression. The fact that she felt like she was losing control and feeling somewhat hopeless and helpless is very common with depression and PTSD. They've always done a really, really good job of getting that right. Really good job of getting that right. And they did show a coping mechanism in that you just tell someone you trust. That's always one of the steps that we tell people when they're in that situation. If you feel, just tell someone the truth. The really big medical part was the part I mentioned before, the compartmentalization. That is the ultimate physician coping mechanism. And the better you compartmentalize, the less things affect you and the less you carry with you from situation to situation. And what you see with Lizzie is that happening. You know, it's like she's, yes, this all is happening, but when it came time to focus on Lizzie and her thing, she was in another box. She's so used to having compartments, having little boxes, and suddenly the gates were open and she couldn't keep everything contained in little boxes anymore.
I thought it was amazing that she actually used that word after you had brought that up.
Because it's just it's a common coping mechanism for physicians.
Yeah, right.
You compartmentalize. And especially with death, and so the fact that she was a surgeon, she had to do something surgical, but she couldn't.
Right.
That meant she was losing it, and she knew she was losing it.
Interesting.
Because that would have been a perfect time where she would have just shut off and then focused, but she couldn't do that.
Yeah.
The one thing that she knew well how to do as a physician, she couldn't do. Suture.
Right.
And so that was a clear indication that she was. And of course, you know, I still have an issue with the whole ether thing. I mean,
yeah,
it's like, so the next time she was because the last time she was sitting up with a bottle of ether in one hand and she's getting ready to pass out. I'm like, where did it go? Just crash on the floor? She would have put it, I mean, it's like, instead of going out, she went into the dream state and
stayed sitting on the bed.
Yeah, you know, didn't pass out and fall over. I just, you know, just seemed really unrealistic. One of the things I did like, though, is Jamie feeling comfortable with her using whiskey as a numbing agent, but became very concerned when she used ether as a numbing agent. Yeah. He knew the difference and knew the seriousness of the difference between the two.
And I just drew a connection because you said that between Famous Last Words, episode 508, and this episode. Do you remember how, and it's the same writer, so I'm sure that's how she set it up. Do you remember how, as Roger's having all those PTSD, this woman likes to do PTSD, I think, but flashbacks, and then they started to become color, maybe, or they started to become clear. He kept trying to see a face and he could finally see Brianna's face. Maybe that's what she was trying to show with the ether, like Claire's, it's not working anymore. So instead of just passing out, now she's like sitting up and not totally passing out. It's some sort of progression, but I get what you're saying. It's not functionally correct.
No, but yeah. I mean, but the point of it was that she was trying to use it to escape and it wasn't helping her escape anymore.
Yes, it was worse.
Which is really what addiction does. It's like you have to escalate the use in order to get the same result. And she was getting to that point.
I also thought, in terms of mental health, the fact that she told Jamie when she said, I took some ether and had to lie down, you know, that's indicative of asking for help, which is, you know, one of the first stages of like, I can't do this anymore. I can't handle this. I need help. And she did it in such a British way. Like, oh, I just did a little ether and had to lie down. And he's like, what?
He's like, wait, what? Because to them, it was like death.
Yeah. Well, you know, it was great because I think it was in the first episode, 601, he said, you know, it would be a shame to not feel anything. When she describes, like, I'm so excited about the ether. and he has this wariness of it. And then to find out she's doing it, yeah. I'm sorry Antoinette's not here. I was going to ask her, how would you go about solving the mystery of who killed Malva? What would you do? And one of her things would be she would hire expert witness, which you just were, because you said somebody was right-handed and did it from the back.
Yeah, and you're talking about motive means and
yes, opportunity.
Motive means and an opportunity.
Opportunity, yeah. We'll have to pick that back up.
Yeah.
In another episode discussion.
One of the things I think that was religious law that came up was where she would be buried.
That I looked up to see if Presbyterians in that era did have consecrated graves and graveyards, because I know that many of the different groups, the Church of England certainly did, for example, but they did. But then they also had what's called dedicated graves, and those were for the people who weren't quite in good standing. So they had both, and apparently there's one place in England where there's a wall between the two that goes 14 feet underground.
In case they crawl over.
I guess, to make sure that
nothing can't get through.
Nothing from that's right. Can't get over to the good side, which I thought was quite interesting. Tidbit of history there. I still was looking for the cairn.
Yeah, it's just gone.
Yeah. It's gone.
Yeah, we'll have to talk to Stephen about that.
Yeah.
Well, okay, let's go to favorite lines, Kath.
My favorite line was, and the reason it was my favorite line is because it's often misspoken. But when Lionel Brown says, aren't you supposed to do no harm? Given that's my, Twitter handle, Dr. Do No Harm. But it's a misconception that is part of the Hippocratic Oath.
It is not. That's correct. Not.
And now there's the modern Hippocratic Oath is from 425 AD.
Wow.
But there's one prior to that, and it's like there may have been something assigned to Hippocrates that said, essentially along the same lines, but they don't know for sure. And they just may have said it, but it wasn't an oath that doctors take. And in fact, even now, most schools don't even have their students cited anymore.
Yeah, it's other kinds. They either write their own or the Oath of Geneva. I mean, there's a whole bunch of
the whole bunch
ones,
of them.
But different schools do different things.
We said ours at our white coat ceremony, where we're given our white coats once we were matriculated, and we said it in unison with it, and it was very moving. But at no point did we say do no harm. We do say, not to. There is a line that essentially says that we won't do anything to cause anyone to get worse, I guess is basically along those lines, but which is
it is a really widespread fallacy. But...
It is. Yeah. My other favorite was when he said, when you married a jealous English woman with a sharp tongue and a sharper knife. And I was like, woo. That was a serious line.
Hiram was throwing it down, man.
He was.
And it also just reminds you the hostility between Scottish and the English. You forget.
Yes. And between Catholics and at least the Presbyterian had toward the Catholics on the Ridge, because that was part of the book. A distinct part of the book is that they had very low opinion of people Catholics. Who were Catholic.
Yeah. Just let me put my britches on. I'm not conducting my first wedding bare arse. I loved that one. And then I loved how the camera followed him back to changes to put his pants on.
And everyone's like, can we see?
I was like, that looks like a dirty shirt for you to be sleeping.
That really looked grubby, didn't it?
I'm gonna fly up or something.
I'm like, I'd be like, can you put on a clean shirt?
That doesn't look like Brie. She's really pretty.
Yeah,
well, I thought it was just the
Industrious.
color of the shirt. I thought it was just like, because it was like raw. Like, I thought it was just like a raw.
But it looked like he
could
had
be.
sweat stains down the
maybe,
center of it, or maybe it was between his chest.
I mean, that's probably
bits.
realistic because, you know, doing laundry was not easy.
Oh, I know. It was.
So,
yeah.
but
They didn't bathe that much, and they didn't wash their clothes that much.
I would do it all again and more to be with you when Claire says that. Again, I loved us being able to see Claire in a desperate, vulnerable, fragile position. You know, Jamie was like a life raft at that point.
Yes.
And for her to just bear it all like that. Just, you know, I am broken right now.
Yes.
And I would do it all again to be with you. I loved that.
Yeah.
Thank you, season 6.
Yes.
It certainly has reaffirmed our belief in the Jamie Claire love story. At least it has for me. That this season has.
Yeah.
And it is a love story, not just a romance. One of my favorites was when Jamie says, "Let me join you. I cannot do that when you put yourself to sleep." Mm-hmm. That is true of any relationship. When one person is absent in one form or another, I don't care whether they're using ether or their job is paramount, the other partner cannot reach them until they come and allow that to happen. And that, I think, is one of the reasons why so many relationships fail, is because people can't get past that and realize that they have to place the relationship first. They have to let go of these other things that are screaming for their devotion and attention.
Well, not only that, and it's not only marriages, but
well, that's true. But I'm talking about a marriage now, because that's
I just found out that my mother has been on Ativan her whole life, and also not just Ativan, but multiple drugs, which has been a big realization for me and actually freeing, because that's why I can never connect with her. That's why she could never connect with me. So my point is saying, Harmon,
children too.
Other relationships, you mean?
Yeah.
That, you're right.
If you put yourself to sleep, even if you're walking and you're asleep, you can't emotionally connect. You can't go to that place if the other person's not doing drugs and you are. Then there is no possibility. And as a child, it was like,
I mean, you have no idea what, the child always thinks they've done something wrong, that they're responsible somehow for what's going on. I also want to say that it's not always drugs. It's not always drugs. It's other things, people's jobs, people's outside interests, social climbing, trying to be rich, instead of making a living to make your family comfortable and sufficient. No, you got to be the wealthiest man on earth. You got to fly your
rocket to the moon,
heavens to show everybody that you're the best.
Can do it. You can buy Twitter and then have your account suspended for violation of Twitter.
That's right. Exactly. Well, I really thought the way that Catelyn delivered her line, or Lizzie, they're identical everywhere, if you take my meaning. I laughed out loud at that one. She just did it so well, and Claire's just...
Claire's face.
Like, I'm a doctor. I think I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, but she was a little embarrassed. Like,
yes,
she
was like that. Like TMI.
I did not need to know that.
TMI.
Exactly.
Lines don't get me, is how they're delivered. And so it's my favorite delivery rather than my favorite line, like between Tom and Claire when he is asking her about what would be said about Malva. I felt that all the lines that Alex delivered as Alan, he did them very well. I mean, he could have gone over the top, and it could have been, he just went to the edge of that, where it was just histrionic almost, but he didn't. It was just enough so that even his father was like, where did that come from?
I liked Lionel's, because you know something, he can't save you from yourself.
Yeah.
And then I already mentioned Mrs. Bug. What about the rest of us to live with such a scandal?
You know, the last two that I have are both Lionel lines. I mean, he had some really piercing things that he said. Of course, they were from Claire's own mind. Yeah. But one of them was, she says, she described herself witch, murderer, and he said, murderous suits best. Yeah. And that was just so, I mean, creepy. It was just creepy. The guy is very, very good at sowing seeds of discontent in me. And the other one was a part of when he said, leaving when you should have, you stayed in a loveless marriage, you know, you were in a loveless marriage. And then he said, leaving when you should have stayed, staying when you should have left, when you should have gone. I mean, those are pretty poetic way of, you know, turning that around. And I just thought he, you know, they gave him some great speaking parts in this. And, you know, I have to say that part of the reason why what he had to say grasped me so much was the creepy way in which they showed him. I mean, he was standing at the door when Jamie went in, you know, when she came out and she didn't want to even go in her surgery. And Jamie, you know, went in very apprehensive, you know, to see what she was frightened of. He was standing right there in the door. Of course, he can't see him, but she could, you know, and he's just so pervasive everywhere and malevolent. It just gave me this feeling of a creepy, nasty ghost. Yeah. There's your ghost.
Ghost, yeah. But you know, what's really, she really looked frightened when he went in the room. Like there was something really in there that she did not want him to go in there.
And she said, don't go in there.
And that was such a good grasp of where she was. That is such a good indication of where she was psychologically.
Yeah, I would really like to know how she prepared.
When you take into consideration that this person who's haunting her raped her.
Yeah.
So that's why he can haunt her like that.
Exactly. But it just compounds I mean, it's like, it's one thing, oh yeah, you're creepy, yeah, you're a ghost, yeah, you're but when you think about the humiliation on top of the shame, the humiliation, the degradation that occurred, and then to have him in her head like that, is just it's heartbreaking.
It is. And I want to say that I'm sorry, I don't mean to be crude by saying this, but he was penetrating her personality in the same way that he penetrated her, or at least it's a metaphor, you know, it was
a mind rape.
Yes, it was a mind rape. It was exactly.
Well, and as Catherine was saying, it would be so terrible because he's already been inside her body and he's inside her mind.
Yes. That is just, the thought of it is just, you know, it's terrifying.
And he's Ned's so good. That's another one I want to interview.
They had Jamie get it. He knew what it meant.
Yes.
And in the past, for some reason, they just didn't bring up the fact that he's been through other things that parallel what she's going through. It was very clear that he knew exactly what she meant and what she was going through.
He reminded her of it.
Yeah.
Too. You know, he told her, I know.
This episode highlighted for me why the writing didn't work last episode. Because so much of what Sam did as Jamie in this episode was subtle. But it was there. It was there. As Antoinette said, you can't just invent stuff that's not there that you're supposed to be doing.
I'm wondering if, for non-book readers, if they kept him aloof so that the Malva piece might have been believable. I don't know.
I think it was only last episode that.
Well, that's what I'm saying. It was like
for
just
me.
that.
Oh, I see. Yeah,
I can't explain it otherwise.
I just think it was
was really a misstep otherwise.
Well, oh yeah, and I think honestly, there have been other times across the seasons.
Yes,
when that would have been appropriate for him to have, made it reveal that, and for him to draw to her attention or whatever. I can't think of specifics right now, but whatever situation where he could have been more forthcoming about his own experiences and and instead they have him being so stoic. He is stoic, but he's not that stoic.
Not with Claire.
Out in the books.
With her,
not
yeah.
with Claire.
Not with Claire. No. But and one of you mentioned that part of why she didn't want to process this with him was because she didn't want to bring up Wentworth for him. That wasn't really addressed here, but I wonder if that was at play at all.
I'm sure, because I'm sure she's still protective of him.
Now, Mr. Fraser, let every man be swift to hear and slow to anger.
Yeah, just don't beat me up.
That got Jamie's attention. He was like, okay, good point. And then the guy came in with the, daggers after that one.
Yeah, he wanted him to back off so he could finish with his backstabbing.
Jamie said, as a wise man once told me, there's always a war coming. Who told him that? Was it Myrta?
I don't remember. Myrta? Was it Myrta?
I thought it was Roger. Was it?
I wondered
when he said it. My assumption was Roger said it.
Well, Roger says the war when they're there by the paddock.
Yeah, but somebody in a past season or book said that, and I don't remember. Someone who's watching will tell us.
Yeah,
and then the last
was it one of the chiefs?
Oh, from the Indian village.
Mm-hmm. It might be there.
And the last one was spreading your legs for 2 men, wed to neither, now with a baron, and you cannot name its father. Jamie, that it's good because they have shied away from that in the past, but that was Jamie. Jamie's a devout Catholic and an 18th century man, and that's how he would have felt.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and he would have been blunt about it too, like that, because he would have put the welfare of the child ahead of her welfare or the welfare of the Beardsleys, who he apparently wanted to kill at that moment.
He's like, well, it may not be a decision
clearly
you have to make, because I may make it for you.
That's right.
Yeah.
When they showed the river, and then she says, don't you think it's interesting how people say, well, it's only human when they've done something wrong?
Mm-hmm.
And they're trying to excuse their actions. And I thought that was very insightful.
Yeah.
And
very true.
And true. Yeah. Very true. I thought that this episode was full of just really memorable lines.
Mm-hmm.
It is really hard for me to pick out very many of them because I was starting to get a really long list of just really profound things that people said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And I thought that's really good writing. Roger began to talk with Jamie about what he wanted to do. Parts of that are from the book also, especially where he expresses his feelings about having killed the man from Brownsville. He said, "Thou shalt not kill." And I thought that was great, Jamie's response to him when he said in Latin and Hebrew, the word is murder. Malva was murdered.
Her speech at the beginning was just like, it was, and if you read the books, it was very, very telling. And then because the second time I watched it, I didn't watch her, I watched the reactions of everybody in the room when they showed them.
Mm-hmm. Spoiler. Yeah, I thought again, the theme of duplicity when Malva is saying the word.
You mean at the start?
It was just very
she
interesting.
never names the person she's talking about.
Yeah, and that's what I was saying, that it was like Frank. She was telling the truth. She said, I lost my innocence. It was stolen, taken by someone I trusted.
Yes.
Who made promises, who was supposed to be kind to me. And they show Alan is in the frame suffering.
He's fidgeting
down at the lower end.
He's
right?
suffering. He's like, ugh. Catherine, what are your standouts?
Standouts for me were Sam and Rick. They were consistent. They didn't overact. They were, I just thought it was those two were the standouts in this. Apart from the story itself, I thought the subtlety of the softening of Tom Christie also stood out. And
Mark
those
Lewis
were the
Jones,
yeah. Mark Lewis Jones, yes.
Yeah.
And those stood out the most for me.
I noted the writing, the camera work, and the directing. I don't know what is those three things. It's a team of those three things, and it worked. I thought Katrina was excellent in this episode. I thought Sam was excellent. I want to shout out to Alexander Vallejos, who I thought did a great job. Richard was also on my list. Sarah Collier, Mrs. Bug, Mark Lewis Jones, and the music. Those were my standouts.
I actually love seeing I don't want to be plastered with it, but here and there, scenes of the ridge, peaceful scenes of the beauty of nature, because it kind of contrasts with all the turmoil that's going on in the episode. And it's this quiet backdrop, of life continues on. And that's the way it is in our lives too. When we think that the world is coming to an end, it's out there carrying on its usual cycles. And I think that's really, really an addition to the flavor of the episode. I loved the music. And I thought that the acting and the writing was extremely strong, I felt. I thought the acting by Katrina and Sam they were just in tune with each other, in my opinion. They really were. Especially Sam was attuned, or Jamie was attuned to Claire. And that was a pleasure to see. I thought Alex and Tom were really, really good. I thought that Mrs. Bug, same as you, she's a malevolent lady, and pretty sharp tongue for being a housekeeper. She expects an awfully lot, I felt, and has no problem with saying it. And I thought she, like you said, Courtney, she was very strong and could play off from Sam and Kat, both of whom are powerful actors. And she held her own in that particular scene, and she's just like, well, what about me? What about me? Take care of me. And it's clear from the way that she behaved that she thought that Claire had murdered her. To me, I thought that was the message she was saying. She didn't say it outright, but she implied it several times. I thought, what are they going to do with these people? They've not done anything with them, since they came to the ridge. And then all of a sudden, okay, there it is. I've been waiting for it, and there I've got it.
I thought Hugh Ross, who's Mr. Bug, was really good too.
Yeah. He was. He just didn't have as much as I felt it too. But that little part he did with Roger, he was nasty in that.
Yeah.
I don't care about your kid, and I'll show him the terrors of the world if I want to.
You mentioned the showing the ridge and the scenes of the Blue Ridge Mountains. I live in the Carolinas, and we drive up to North Carolina often, and it really looks that way.
Yes, it does.
You can pull off on most mountain roads and look out, and that's exactly what you see. They are truly Blue Ridge Mountains, and
I've been there too,
and it looks like they look painted. That's how beautiful it is.
Let's do our big themes, Catherine.
My big theme was no good deed goes unpunished. Claire being kind to Malva and what that led to. A little bit from last episode when you had Roger, being kind to Amy and then having Malva throw it into her face. But I mean, that wasn't in this episode, but it's sort of a running theme. Roger, Jamie, it's like they called themselves being kind and then they ended up being, suffering for it. Like all the fisher folk and
letting Malva be the
apprentice
and all that. Yeah.
And it's just that the lack of gratitude.
They're assholes.
Yeah,
they really
but they were all there because of the kindness of and the generosity. He could have easily just taken that land and said it's mine and not even invited anybody.
Don't you think that some of that is jealousy of?
Oh, of course.
Clearly, clearly.
Oh yeah.
And especially if they see Catholics as inferior to be living on the,
they weren't supposed to get the land. Remember, Catholics weren't supposed to even allowed to have that land. But point. The other is, not only do they know who he is there, but they all know that he is the grandson of a laird in Scotland. Any animosity they had, even there, would have been carried over. Not just because of where he is in North Carolina, but also because of who he's descended from. He was
they also know that he was descended from the fox.
Love it.
That it was killed in the Tower of London, so beheaded.
Because even it came up in last episode where Malva asked him about it. So they know that who he is, and so of course there's a lot of jealousy, but the meddling that Lionel Brown talks about with Claire isn't so much her meddling, it's her kindness and her wanting to help. And it just gets her into trouble.
And a little bit her wanting to have someone who is passionate about what she's passionate about.
Yeah.
I think that's why she was blinded to Malva, to the Mal part of Malva.
Yeah. Mal.
My big theme was absolution, which is formal release from guilt, obligation, or punishment. And Jamie is the real priest in this episode, He
is.
Because, Claire confesses and confides and expresses her deepest fears, and he absolves her. He says in such a beautiful way, okay, if that's selfish, I'll go to the devil himself and bless him for tempting you to it. I don't know if you guys have husbands like that, but I do. And it feels so good when when somebody is able to meet you where you are and say, that's not a problem. Yeah. I know you're feeling, especially as a Catholic, there's already built-in guilt. You're feeling, and if you're not supposed to be selfish and you're not supposed to be, you're feeling all that stuff. And somebody comes in there and shines the light and says, that's bullshit, dude. I'm here and I'm going to help you through this. And then he absolves Roger. Roger wants to be a minister, and his hang up in his mind is, but I've killed a guy. How can I reconcile this? And Jamie just,
here's how you can do it.
Yeah. And it tells him, that thou shalt not kill. It should be thou shalt not murder. And you haven't done that. So you're good. Jamie really does carry the burden, and he releases people from their burdens.
Yes. Something about that scene also that we finally got was how educated he is, because he mentioned that the Greek and in Greek Hebrew, and it's like how he was well studied.
Yeah.
It wasn't just he was just some soldier. He was a well studied. He was,
and that's right from the books.
Yeah,
right.
He's truly a well educated gentleman. Yes, and this episode more than any other has shown that.
Yeah. And then just my other example is that Malva confesses her heartbreak in the church, And then she's murdered, and Jamie absolves her by making sure she's buried in consecrated ground.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he really is the priest in this episode. And
good point.
Confession and absolution, I think, is a major theme. He even absolves Lizzie. He's pissed by then because it's a lot of absolving he's done through marriage, by saying, okay, you freak, you're gonna marry this guy, and then that's gonna make it okay. And you know, yeah.
Now he's got two handcuffs. I wondered how they were going to do it, you know, because she uses thumb scars in the the book, and those were part of the.
And Kezzy's talks differently because which I don't think is happening anymore. So
largely deaf.
Yeah, I thought that scene in the barn was good, where he's like, "You are Kezzy, right?" You know.
They didn't say anything. Did you notice that? He didn't say, "Yes, I'm Kezzy." Didn't answer Jamie. But it was because when they go to Roger's house, she says that, you know, Joe and I want to be married. So it was Kezzy, presumably. Yeah. Those are both excellent. And I certainly agree with all that you've said. I think one of the big themes for me, and it probably is a reflection of my background and training, but I was struck by how a 20th century woman in an 18th century community terrifies and disrupts the social order. Just the fact that she isn't anything that she does, a cap, the simplicity of whether or not she wears a cap bothers these people. The fact that she, strides down the road alone, that she speaks to people as if she's men, as though they are her equal, she is their equal. All of those things are just terribly threatening to that community. Now, amongst the settlers, I think she does better, and certainly amongst her family, because they're now used to her. But the fisher folk, they just don't like her. They don't like what she's doing to their society. Everything was laid out nicely in their little compartments. And guess what she's done to those compartments? She has messed them good. And I think that is, it's not just a tale. It is a moral tale, in my opinion. The whole story is. But this episode is a moral tale to me about how society can be so incredibly cruel to someone that might seem different to them for whatever reason. And it's as applicable today as it is for Claire in the time that she found herself. And that's the big thing for me. Oh, it was lovely to see you guys.
Yeah,
it's me too. It was a great discussion.
I'd love to hear how things strike you.
Yeah.
What your response is.
We all are so different in the things we
I know.
And
even though we're watching the same thing, you know.
Do you think we're going to find out next week who murdered Malva?
I do.
I would think so, yeah.
But they've got a lot of turf to cover.
I know. I am just so impressed with this season. I'm sorry to see it
coming to an end. I know.
Me too. Is Mandy going to be born before it's out?
She's not even showing.
I know. So,
yeah,
but it's going to be interesting. Off, and I figure when she comes back, she'll be close to.
Yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it, and that's as a book fan, that's fantastic.
Yeah,
like I really didn't know what was going to happen in this episode. Exactly, and how they were going to do it.
Seven's going to have a lot of living up to do.
I know. Well, they're doing it now. You know what? I'm hopeful that they will. I have this theory that it took them 5 months to shoot these 8 episodes. So theoretically, if they shoot April, May, June, July, August, and then take a break so that Sam can go do Everest and people, maybe through Christmas or something, they can get those 8 episodes ready to drop to us before like 2 years. They could give us.
Well, they've done that before.
Yeah,
They
that's
split the year in two and showed the first half and then later showed the second half.
I'd be happy to take these seasons in 8 episode increments. Okay.
Yeah. All right.
Goodbye.
Good night. Love you guys.
And I'll be.
Love you too.
I might have someone overnight some digestives to me if I can.
Yeah, seriously.
All right. Bye, y'all.
Bye.
Bye.
Oops. Leave.